Okay, pushing through. All right. Long week, busy week, kind of tired, pretty wiped. Um, I was struggling a little bit to figure out what to talk about this week because I hadn't really scheduled anything exactly. But then I got a note that the test process for both I believe it's the Verdin brother and the Andrew Weathers 10-year reissue uh, are shipping, and I will probably have them tomorrow. They ship from Taiwan, and they get here very, very quickly, which is very nice. Which brought up a couple of things in my mind about tests, and so I just kind of want to throw it out there to other labels and artists, kind of asking a few questions, and some of my people who buy things. I have some questions about tests. So pressings. If you don't know, part of the process of making a record is getting a test pressing. It's sort of the final check before putting a record into production. Is you see art files in sort of mock-ups just to make sure your art files get the last approval on your art files, and then you also get sent at some point test pressings of you know, if this is good. I believe they make the pressings off of temporary stampers. And then if those stampers are approved, you move on and it goes into the manufacturing queue. What you're looking for is either just pure incorrect stamping, like physical imperfections with the stampers. If you're having somebody master and stamp and produce your record at the same time, like I do these days, sometimes you have somebody master and physically cut your lacquers and then send it to the manufacturer. And sometimes you do it both in-house. I do it both in-house these days. But it's like a final check. Also, sometimes it's just, oh, I sent you the wrong files. And sometimes you have to pay, kind of depending on who made the mistake. So yeah, you get these. I usually get 5, and I send 3 off to the artist. I think it's a little cheaper if I send it than if the plant sends it. I have a couple rituals around this. One is I don't say anything to the artist about it until they've heard it. So I don't ever want to. I kind of do that usually with masters as well. I don't want to say anything. One of the biggest things is I would never call myself an audiophile. I'm very much an amateur listener, which I think is good and right. I think that's what you want. Is I represent the average person. When I get a master, I listen to it, kind of naturally. I upload it and listen to it through a streaming service like YouTube Music. Lets me upload my own stuff and listen to it back down. What's it going to sound like on, Bluetooth headphones? What does it sound like in my car? What will sound like through this system? What will sound like through? I have very simple entry-level monitors that are very dry. I just try to listen to it in kind of like the simplest ways and just go, does that sound good? But I don't tend to have big feedback unless something's wildly off, and usually I'm pretty impressed by masters. Unless there's a major defect, I tend to not have a lot of feedback on mastering or not masters, test pressings. But I will listen to it. Right now I'm having some grounding issues. So like, I just don't have a great setup for like the nuance of this stuff. So I want the artist to go listen to it. I do now have a really good hookup for going and listening on a really nice audiophile setup, which I need to start doing with my buddy right in the neighborhood. Anyway, so that's kind of the ritual of it all. It adds a few steps to the process. I'm curious what other labels do when they get a test, and like how it's kind of the scramble mode of like, a lot of times you'll send something off to an artist and like, my stuff's broken. I'm gonna go listen to it with my buddy this weekend, and it's like, it can drag out further and further into the process, this whole thing. Because first you have to ship it to them, then they have to get it, then they have to, so it can kind of drag on a little bit. So yeah, tests are interesting, but tests always like make things real. Like once a test comes in, you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to start working this record really soon. Again, I'm trying to get better at thinking, I'm working this record way before the test happened. These 2 records are really exciting. I've talked and played some stuff from it already, and it's just very, very, it's a very exciting fall that's coming up. One thing about tests is that I see a lot of people selling their test records. And I have, some pretty interesting artists and interesting tests in my pile of tests. They're just kind of all racking up for years and years. And I really do wonder, does anybody, if I started putting up my tests on Bandcamp to buy, 2 or 3 copies of early Elkhorn, Fibrill, Grody, I don't know who, especially older stuff. That'd be interesting. Would people want to buy those at a certain rate? I think if you're a really big fan of a record, it is cool to get the test of it. It's a way to get a piece of vinyl that almost nobody else has. I wonder how much people have had success with that sort of thing before. Yeah, I mean, this is all kind of how half-formed thoughts around this whole idea of tests and test pressing. Maybe there's less of this than I think. I have had some pretty ridiculously bad. I'm trying to remember all of my really bad test pressings. I've had completely other people's records numbered with my matrix code. They scratch in a little, catalog number into the run out area. I've had some pretty insane skipping. I've had some pretty insane warping. I don't get a lot of problems with Mobineko. Winneco. I do endorse the fact that while they're an in-house mastering, which I think back in the day was like scandalous, the thought that you would do that, you wouldn't have a third-party mastering. Well, they do use third-party mastering, that they project manage that for you. And they use really good mastering people. So I will say they're pretty great at managing this stuff. Yeah, it's really exciting when you get a test pressing in. It's because it's your first time you're really going to hear what it sounds like on your main system, and it's a big gate. One thing I will say is a lot of times test pressings are considered optional add-ons, and the thought that, to me, as much as I'll do the sin of having lacquers cut in under the same project as the pressing, I would not print anything without a test pressing. It just seems way too risky and whatnot. I don't think that makes any sense. Yeah, I guess I thought there was more here. There's more here if it's more of a dialogue. I really do wonder what other people's experiences with tests are. Yeah, like I said, we've had everything under the sun, from whole records being on one side being wrong, both sides being wrong, scratched up, 50, it's kind of amazing when you start to notice that like 50% of the run has a pop in one place. It's really hard to tell the difference between your needle being kind of messed up versus the piece of vinyl actually having a consistent piece of damage or, incorrect. Also, you learn your mastering engineer, if they're good, kind of can account for this, but if the record's too dense on each side or has too much bass, learning about all this stuff about like the functional limits of a needle moving on plastic, but when they get very shallow and too close together, like how much that will cause the needle to fly out, or too much bass will cause the needle to fly out. And if you have good mastering engineers, they're accounting for that. Sometimes there's no accounting for it. You just can't fix it. And so I've actually had to remaster things where there's weird phasing patterns that it's like, oh, this isn't what the music is supposed to sound like, especially in big drone records. I believe the Total Life, we had to like go back to the drawing board completely. But again, a lot of this is way in my past. So it feels like a lot of things have gotten better. Either my process has gotten better, or the people I work with has gotten better, or the plants that we work with have gotten better. So yeah, I mean, it's just test pressing, getting that email of a test pressing is shipped. You go from that sort of floaty unknown space of like, well, we're waiting on tests, to, okay, now this is rolling downhill. And getting 2 test pressings in the mail on the same day, because I put those into production pretty close to the same day, if not the same day. It's pretty awesome. And nowadays, in their system, my manufacturer system, Mobineco, once you approve tests, you get a pretty good idea of when the record is going to be done, and they're pretty accurate these days. So it goes from being, yeah, we're kind of in the process of working on that record to, whoa, well, okay, now we know, now we have a deadline and whatnot. So I'm okay with this being a little short record, episode here. We like I said, I'm pretty fried this week, but I do think this is a really interesting. This is one that I would really like some feedback on. I think I would want to hear artists and labels' memories of test pressings, or their feelings when they get a test pressing, or process for test pressings. I'm probably more loosey goosey and not as on top of it as the average person, or as neurotic as the average label or artist is about these things at this point. But I'd love to hear other people's anxieties, or other people's experiences with the test press. Yeah. So in terms of what to play at the end of this, well, we haven't heard much more from the Verdin brothers in a little while, and we're getting the test today. So yeah, let's throw another Verdin brothers song up, and see what we can see. It's a record I'm very excited about. I've said that over and over and over, and it's very, very good, and I just can't wait to share it with everybody. So I'll try to take care of my own, take my own advice about take care of yourself, and take care of each other. Be safe, and I will see you in a week, possibly, if I can get something recorded. I'm going to be on vacation. We'll see if we can do it. Yeah.